Hey, what's up, YouTube fans? So what I want to talk about in this video is how animals, including humans, can be classified into groups based on the way that we develop embryologically, right? And so living animals can be classified into two groups, the diploblasts and the triploblasts, right? The diploblasts have two germ layers, right? Whereas triploblasts have three germ layers. And germ layers are the primary layers of cells during embryonic development, right? Which go on to develop into all of the different regions of the body on the multicellular level, right? And so for us, our germ layers, we have three of them. They're endoderm, ectoderm, and mesoderm. The endoderm is the innermost germ layer. The ectoderm is the outermost germ layer, and the mesoderm is the center one. In the case of diploblasts, they have just two germ layers, which are ectoderm and endoderm, but no mesoderm, right? And a few examples are comb jellies and jellyfish. Those are a few examples of diploblasts, but the vast majority of living animals are triploblasts like us. And also triploblastic animals are also bilaterians, right? Which bilaterians, in addition to having three germ layers, right? Also part of how bilaterians develop is that we have bilateral symmetry where the left side of our body mirrors the right side of our body. Whereas in the case of jellyfish and comb jellies, they have radial symmetry. And in the case of sponges, they're completely asymmetrical, right? But bilaterians, which include the vast majority of living animals, most bilaterians have bilateral symmetry. And bilaterians also have body segmentation, where our body is divided into a series of repeating segments. You can still see that on vertebrates like us with the segmentation of our backbone and ribs and intercostals and the segmentation of our abdomen. And bilaterians also have something called the Hox code, which is a genetic system that determines the positioning of differing body parts, right? And the segmentation of the body helps with determining the positioning of the differing body parts for bilaterians. And there's been some experiments that have shed light on this, like the famous Drosophila fly experiment, where they showed that mutating a fly in certain ways could cause it to be born with legs coming out of its head where its antennas are supposed to be. So that gave scientists some insight as to how Hox genes work, right, in bilaterian creatures, including us, right? And then furthermore, we also can be classified as eucoelomates, right? So animals can be classified into three groups, also eucoelomates, pseudocoelomates, and acoelomates. Eucoelomates, like us, have a true coelom, whereas acoelomates have no coelom, and pseudocoeloms have a pseudocoelom. And so what is a coelom? A coelom is a mesoderm-lined cavity between the gut and the outer body wall, right? So the coelom is why we have space between our gut and our outer body wall, right? And it's mesoderm-lined, so therefore only triploblasts can have a coelom, right? And so flatworms are an example of a acoelomate. And then pseudocoelomates, they have a cavity between their gut and outer body wall, but it's not entirely lined by mesoderm. And nematodes are an example of a pseudocoelomate, right? But me and you are eucoelomates, right? But so the flatworms, they're acoelomates, so their gut is fused to their outer body wall, right? Which shows that there didn't have to be a coelom back when the gut was first evolved. It didn't have to all come about in a single step, which I talked about when I when I did a video on the reducibility of the digestive system, right? Okay, and then furthermore, within the eucoelomates can be divided into a few groups based on how the coelom forms. So, most proterostomes, like insects and mollusks, most of them are schizocoelomates, meaning that their coelom forms through a process called schizocoely, right, where there's splitting of the mesoderm, right? Whereas me and you, we are enterocoelomates, and enterocoelomates have our coelom formed through enterocoely, which is where the coelom forms from out pockets of mesoderm, right? And enterocoelomates are also called deuterostomes. Other traits of deuterostomes include that also during embryonic development, the anus forms before the mouth, right? Whereas it isn't like that for all creatures, but for us, the anus forms before the mouth. And so how the anus and mouth form actually is that the anus forms first and it tunnels through, eventually making its way all the way to the other side, right? And then you get the mouth, right? That's how it forms for deuterostomes like me and you, right? And deuterostomes also develop pharyngeal arches during embryonic development, which play a critical role in the development of differing various parts of the body for deuterostomes, although they develop into very differing things in different groups of deuterostomes. In the case of us, some of our pharyngeal arches play a role in the development of our jaw, right? Because we're part of a group of vertebrates called the gnathostomates, right? And then within the deuterostomes, we have a subgroup called the chordates, and we're part of that group. And chordates are distinguished by different developmental similarities, including that during embryonic development, we have a nodal cord and a postanal tail and a dorsal nerve cord. And the nodal cord, most vertebrates, including us humans, most vertebrates do not retain the nodal cord after we're born, but the nodal cord during embryonic development plays a role in helping the backbone to form. But then in some other chordates like cephalochordates and tunicates and hagfish, they retain the nodal cord even once they're born, right? And then next, we're part of a group called the Therians, which includes the vast majority of living mammals, right? And in the case of Therians, right, we start out having a cloaca during embryonic development, just like other vertebrates, right? But further into development, it separates into separate holes for the anus, whereas there's a separate hole for peeing and reproducing, and then also for females, then that also separates into two separate openings for peeing and reproducing. That's because we're Therians. But in the case of monotremes, reptiles, birds, and amphibians, and many groups of fish, they retain the cloaca even once they're born and become adults. And so like a chicken, for example, takes a dump out of this same exact hole that it lays eggs out of. It doesn't do it out of separate holes. It uses the same hole. And we also, like them, start out with the same hole for, all these different things during our early stages of development. But then because we're therian mammals, it separates into differing wholes later into development, right? But in some rare instances, a person could actually be born with a cloaca. It does happen in some rare instances, but generally it divides into separate wholes. Also, therians, including me and you, therians have a unique upper nose and jaw with a philtrum. So the philtrum is the little indentation in between your nose and your mouth. And part of how it forms during embryonic development gives us insight as to how it evolves, right? Because so during embryonic development, two parts of the upper jaw move together and fuse, right? And then another part moves up and becomes part of the nose, right? Certain, like mess ups basically like in the formation of this can result in like people having a cleft lip and or cleft palate. You might have seen someone like with that condition, right, where they have like a split upper lip, right? It's not all that uncommon. And it's due to, the development of this being messed up. Also, therians have a placenta, so that plays a role in our development. And then also within the therians, we have a group called the placentals, which we're a part of. And placentals during embryonic development have a umbilical cord, which results in the belly button. That's why we have belly buttons, just as all placentals do, right? And so this all just comes to show how different groups of living things different groups of animals can be classified on the basis of how we develop embryologically. All right, that's all for now. See you guys.